More than 1 in 3 people will face cancer in their lifetime. Unfortunately, fear can stop you from getting your cancer screening, but it won't stop cancer. Early detection can save your life. Don't wait for symptoms to appear to act. Cancer screening is safe, effective, and accessible for everyone, including free or low-cost screening programs. Go to cancerscreeninfo.com right now for free screening resources and recommendations from the American Cancer Society. Don't wait. Early detection can save your life. Go to cancerscreeninfo.com today. Cancerscreeninfo.com.
While traveling, it's usually best to pack light. When it comes to money, carrying some cash and having an alternative like Zelle is a great idea. Zelle's an easy way to send and receive money with people you trust. At any U.S. bank, it's already in thousands of different banking apps, and it's money straight into your bank account in minutes fast. Look for Zelle in your banking app today. Safe travels.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Ethos DFS Today podcast. I'm your host, Mike Apotrio, joined by my good buddy, Mr. David Menkoff, here to break down this wonderful Wednesday. I'm all over the place, Dave, tonight. Wednesday, December 1st show. We got 9 games to talk about. Dave, how are we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to differentiate between a Tuesday and a Wednesday with you today. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. It's been a couple weeks since I've been able to have the pleasure of joining you on one of these. So I'm excited to jump into a nice slate tonight.
It is a nice slate. And in my own defense, it is Tuesday when we're recording this, but it's for a Wednesday slate. So no excuse, though. No excuse, man. I've been off the rails, I think, since we jumped on even before the call. But we got 9 games to talk about, my friend. We were chatting about the slate a little bit before we got on actual air, and it's interesting. I think that's the easiest way you could say it, the simplest of ways. But before we jump into anything, quick shout out to our presenting sponsor over at Manscaped. Guys, head over to manscaped.com. Check out their full line of male grooming products. Use that promo code HoopBall20 and you get 20% off plus free shipping on your entire first purchase. So, Dave, I've been chatting all my friends up. I said, get the Lawnmower 4.0. And then they said, at that price, I might as well just get the perfect package kit. And I said, there you go. You did it for me. I didn't even need to sell you. It comes with a little bit of everything. It comes with the toner, comes with the conditioner, comes with the Lawnmower 4.0, comes with I think Santino and I talk about this all the time, the compression boxer shorts are the comfiest boxer shorts I have. Not going to say I wear them every day because I think that's not hygienic, but I wear them on my special occasions. I can tell you that much. And then it also comes with a neat little travel kit. So, guys, head over there, use that promo code HoopBall20, and you get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. So, Dave, we're gonna dive right into this, man. And I'm glad you're on the show. I know you said you had the pleasure of joining me. I have the pleasure of having you on, which is I think I'm getting the better half of this deal here. But we'll start off first game of the night. Minnesota traveling to Washington, taking on the Wizards. As of right now, 214.5 game total. Washington being favored by 3. Patrick Beverley still out. Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Jared Vanderbilt all being considered questionable. Edwards dealing with an illness, non-COVID related. And for the Wizards, it's just Thomas Bryant and Rui Hachimura. I'll let you start us off, kick it off at the top, Dave. Who are you looking at for the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. There's a few questionable price tags that are going to make it very interesting in terms of from the Timberwolves' perspective, who we're going to look at. I think if we get news Anthony Edwards is out, I'm pretty confident in going after Malik Beasley. He's a guy that has been getting minutes in the high 20s. If Edwards is out, he should be able to get minutes in the high 20s again. And he's been putting up pretty consistent fantasy numbers, but at 4,500, I'm willing to take a shot here against the Wizards in Washington. So I like Beasley quite a bit at that lower price tier. If Vanderbilt plays, I like him at 5,000. It's a little bit too high of a price tag, but he should be able to get close to a double-double if he does get minutes. Again, we have to monitor those injury news. Luckily, it's one of the earlier games on the slate. Apologies. So I'm going to be looking at that very closely to see who I'm looking at. And then as far as the high-price guys, D'Angelo Russell, 8,400, has been on an absolute tear the last couple of games. Do I trust him normally? No. And he's priced over 8,000 for the first time this season, but he's been playing great basketball. And again, if Edwards is out, he's another guy that should have a rock solid floor and a pretty nice ceiling as well. And then finally, I'm going to have some shares of Karl Anthony Towns at 9,500. That price tag is hovering at a point where it's worth attacking, especially with Edwards potentially out. His usage will also skyrocket along with Russell and the rest of the guys I mentioned. So something to monitor as well. If everyone plays, I'm not going to have as much interest in Towns. I'm going to be looking at Russell as a number one, and then I'll sprinkle in some Anthony Edwards as well. What about yourself?
I'm very much kind of in line with what you're saying. If Edwards sits, I think the two guys I'd look at the most would be Beasley, Russell. I'd probably have a good majority of Beasley. He'd probably be fairly chalky, and it seems like chalk just to eat. He's playing high 20 minutes as it is now. If Edwards sits, I think we're looking at 34, 35 minutes pretty comfortably. They'll probably end up starting Okogie again, regardless of whether or not Vanderbilt's able to suit up or not. He would probably be the guy that draws the start, which we're fine with. I think I'd rather have Beasley come off the bench and have that bench usage. And then I think Russell would be in play even at that price tag. If Edwards plays, I'm probably not going to have much to do with anybody in this game, to be honest. Just a big slate, a lot of guys to spend up on, a lot of guys to go around and look at. And Washington's been playing better defense than most people give them credit for. So that's just the way I'm looking at it. It's worth noting Towns put up 32 actual points in that last game. Still only managed to finish with 41 fantasy points, which is a little bit of a shocker because he also had 8 rebounds because there was 9 turnovers. I don't think he's going to have 9 turnovers, again, probably for the rest of the season. But he's in a good spot, and if you're looking for like a mid-tier guy to spend up on, I say mid-tier compared to like the other 11, 10K plus guys on this slate available. He's in a decent spot. Gafford's dealing with a thumb injury, so I'm not necessarily scared off that defense. But really, I'm just waiting to monitor that Edwards news. And if he sits, I think Beasley is probably one of my number one targets to look at and probably one of my favorite value plays. On the Washington side of the ball, very similar. Not probably playing anybody. I mean, Gafford will be in play. I always talk about centers going against Karl Anthony Towns, something I like to target. He hasn't gotten a price bump despite 3 straight games of 30-plus DK points. Dealing with that thumb injury, not on the injury report, though, so it's not too severe. Clearly, he's going to be playing. Nothing to worry about there. But at 4,800, I think he's still in a very, very comfortable price range and decent target to take a look at. But that's probably going to be about it for me. I just haven't been playing much of Beal, and when I have, I've just been left holding the bag, a little disappointed. 9K, you're really looking for 45-plus DK points, and there's a lot of guys on this slate, and he could get it done. It's Bradley Beal. But it seems like he's, the usage is still somewhat there. It's just nowhere near where it was last year. I mean, Dinwiddie and Kuzma are absorbing a lot of that. So that's probably it for me. Mostly just Gafford.
Yeah, I'm going to have to align with you. It looks like we're right off to where we left off last time. We're just in pretty much cahoots when it comes to our picks. So when it comes down to it, Daniel Gafford is definitely in play. They made comments that he's going to get more minutes moving forward. For the time being, especially given the coach's comments recently. So that's something to monitor as well. We haven't seen that minute spike yet, but that could happen in this matchup, especially if you see that of foul trouble against Karl Anthony Towns. His last 2 games putting up over 30 fantasy points, and yet his price tag's under 5K. So that's a great value play at center, and something I definitely want to look at and continue to definitely target on the Wizards side. And I'm with you. I think Bradley Beal just hasn't been consistent enough this season. His price tag reflects it. We haven't seen a lot of 50-point outings. In fact, we haven't seen any over his last 10 games. So that's something to look at too. Daniel Gafford is my only play on the Wizards side of the ball in this matchup.
We will keep it moving then. Next game, Atlanta Hawks traveling to Indiana. They're taking on the Pacers for the injury report. Bogdanovic, DeAndre Hunter, Onyeka Okongwu, are all ruled out, and then we have Cam Reddish. Excuse my phone going off. Cam Reddish is questionable for the Pacers. Justin Holiday has been ruled out. Miles Turner is questionable. He sat out that last game with an illness, and we saw Domantas Sabonis just go bananas. Got the price increase with it. So I'll lead us off here. With the Hawks, I got a little interest here. I think Trey Young at 9,800. Probably not a guy I end up spending up on. I haven't played much of Trey at all this season, but I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to. He's one of those guys where, he's got a comfortable floor just because we know the assist totals are going to be there. The usage is going to be there. He's always capable of putting up 30-plus actual points. I'm not going to be overly invested in this game. If anything, I'm going to look at some of these ancillary options. Your Kevin Huerta, your Danilo Gallinari, especially if we see Reddish sits. I think both these guys are very, very much in play. I'd probably lean more Huerta just because of the comfortability, knowing that he's going to start. He's going to play starters level minutes. And he just hasn't had that, big game over the last 3. And by big, I mean like 30 DK points. But the 3-point shooting has been rough for him, needless to say. He's been 3 for his last 14 from deep, and I'm expecting him to right that ship. I'd expect double-digit shot attempts in this game for him. So at 4,400, he'd probably be my main target. And if you wanted to get freaky in GPPs, throw in a little bit of Gallinari.
Yeah, I have to say, when it comes down to the Hawks, there's definitely a lot of interest here for me as well. Definitely some guys that I'm looking at, especially if this game ends up staying close. What the spread indicates that it will. I like guys like Trey Young, 9,800. He's been playing fantastic recently, averaging over 50 fantasy points a game over his last 5. So I like Trey Young in this matchup against the Pacers. Going to be in play for me. I'm also going to have some interest in John Collins at 6,900. We haven't seen a 40-point effort from him in some time. Going back to a couple of weeks ago against Boston, but this could be a great opportunity against the Pacers side. He's going to be overlooked as well, so something to consider for me. I like John Collins here, and then you mentioned Kevin Huerta. I like Huerta here at 4,400. I think he hasn't been playing really well recently. We haven't seen consistent games out of him. If Cam Reddish ends up sitting out, is a game time decision. If he's out, I like Kevin Huerta a little bit more at 4,400 than usual. And that's it for me. I'm not going to have a lot of shares of Gallinari, although I won't fault anyone for going there. I just won't be looking in that direction. And that's it for me on the Hawks side.
We will shift over. And I didn't mention the game total. It's 217.5 with a 1-point spread right now. Looking at this Pacers team, only one guy. I mean, if Miles Turner gets rolled out, yes, Sabonis is right back in play, even with that enormous price increase of a K more. He's 9,400 now, but, do I expect him to put up another triple-double, 25 rebounds? No, but I do expect at least 15 rebounds, and I would take that prop bet, 14, 15 rebounds for Sabonis if Miles Turner's out. When he plays that center position, sky's the limit for him when it comes to rebounding. Usage will be increased ever so slightly, not like Miles Turner has a whole lot, but he gets increased efficiency look when he's playing more around the basket. So only reason I'd have him is if Miles Turner sits. If Miles Turner plays, I'll have no shares. But the other guy I want to talk about, and that I will have a ton of shares of, is Chris Duarte at 4K. With no Justin Holiday, he's probably going to be inserted back in that starting lineup, which means we should be seeing 30-plus minutes of Duarte again. And at 4K, a guy that's consistently been putting up at least 20 DK points over the last 5 games in limited minutes, sign me up. I'm good with it. 4K, I think, is a very comfortable price tag. He's going to be good for cash, GPP. You can play him there as well. But I think he's an excellent play for value at 4K.
Yeah, I have to say, when it comes down to the Pacers, on paper, there's definitely some things that I really love here as well. When it comes down to it, Domantas Sabonis 9,400 is a little bit too high of a price tag. I'm not going to chase 25 rebounds, but this is a great matchup for him going up against the Hawks, where they're giving up some rebounding, right in the middle of the pack when it comes to rebound percentage in as far as the NBA goes. So I like Sabonis at 9,400. Do I think he's warranting that price tag? No, but I'll have shares for him in a lot of tournaments. Mostly, not as much as a cash floor for me. And then Malcolm Brogdon at 7,700, a guy that we've seen in the past put up numbers, coming off a nice 46-point effort against the Timberwolves. But in this game, I'm not going to have too many shares of him. Again, mostly reserved for tournaments. You touched on Chris Duarte. That's a great price tag and a guy that should get ample of run, like you mentioned, and a guy that I'm going to be looking at pretty heavily as a value play on the slate, one of the best guard value plays, just given the potential minutes he's going to be playing in this matchup against the Hawks. So I like him a lot. And those are the guys I'm going to look at. I'm not going to have a lot of shares of Karis LeVert at 5,400 or guys like TJ McConnell, despite the lower price tag at 4,400. I'm really going to be staying away in this type of game. So that's it for me on the Pacers side of the ball as well.
Some coffee's fast, but not fresh. Some coffee's fresh, but only after a long wait. Speedway Coffee is made fresh at the push of a button, hot or iced, so you can have fresh coffee your way, right away. Get 2 times the points when you buy any size hot or iced coffee drink with Speedy Rewards.
While traveling, it's usually best to pack light. When it comes to money, carrying some cash and having an alternative like Zelle is a great idea. Zelle's an easy way to send and receive money with people you trust. At any U.S. bank, it's already in thousands of different banking apps, and it's money straight into your bank account in minutes fast. Look for Zelle in your banking app today. Safe travels.
Yeah, and this one just kind of has like a little mini game stack feel to it. I probably won't end up going there, but it wouldn't shock me if this ends up being one of those overtype type games. But we'll move on to the next one. Another 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game, the last of the 7 o'clock start games. Denver Nuggets traveling to Orlando. Jokic coming off of a Miami hangover, partying with his Serbian brothers out there in the club while they're playing the Serbian national anthem over there. Those dudes just took over Miami for the night. It seems like Miami just totally forgot that they lost and that this dude just beat the crap out of Markieff Morris like a couple weeks back. So they didn't care. Shows how Markieff Morris, how much they love him down there. But looking at this game, so far, right now, 206 game total. So a little bit of one of the lower ones of the day. 7.5 favorites going towards Denver. For the injury report, PJ Dozier done for the season. Michael Porter Jr. looking like he's done for the season. Jamal Murray out. JaMychal Green questionable. Orlando Magic, Michael Carter-Williams, Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Etuan Moore, and now Jalen Suggs all rolled out. Looks like Cole Anthony will be back. I'll pass it over to you. Who are you looking at for Denver?
Yeah, Denver side of the ball. I have to start with Mr. Miami party animal himself, Nicole Yokic, at 11,800. Yes, he's one of the highest priced players on the slate, but I still think it's a great opportunity for a triple-double type of game here. We haven't seen any triple-doubles in his last few games, in quite a couple weeks, actually, for Jokic, so that's surprising. I expect him to get back on the triple-double train here in a plus matchup against the Magic. This is a great opportunity for him. So I fully encourage to play him in cash and tournaments alike. And I'm not scared too much of the price tag either. I think he's refreshed and ready to go after sitting out with a wrist injury. I think he's going to be back to his normal playmaking ways here, and triple-double alert is fully in effect here. As far as anyone else in the Nuggets, I have a hard time really trusting anyone else, truthfully. The other guys that I'm really looking at are at the lower tier of the spectrum, apologies, when it comes down to it, and that's the guards, and that's Bones Highland coming back also from ankle injury, put up 27 fantasy points at 3,000 salary in the last game against Miami. I expect him to get around 20-25 minutes again in this game against Orlando, especially if it ends up being potential blowout. I love Bones Highland at 3,600. I think it's a great value price tag, and a guy that I'm going to be playing in a few spots here and there as well. And that's pretty much it on the Denver side of the ball. I'm not going to be looking at too much Aaron Gordon at 700. I think the price tag is just a little bit too high for Mr. Gordon. What about you? Are you liking Jokic here in this matchup?
I love him. I'll never talk anybody off Joker. Like you said, triple-double upside. Game doesn't have the highest game total. I'm expecting a big game out of him. Like you said, potential triple-double. I agree with everything that you said over there. He's one of those guys we talked about before we got on air. I was tossing and turning between some of these high-priced guys. It's only him and one other option for me. And we'll get to that other option in a few games, but I definitely think he's very, very much in play. And I can see myself playing a share or two of Bones Highland. I don't know if I'll go crazy because we do have some other guards that are cheap that we've talked about, and I don't know if I'd want to pair those two necessarily together. But I'm definitely interested to see. I think his minutes will probably even increase a little bit. He played 20 in that last one. It wouldn't shock me if he plays 22 or 23 here. So I'll keep him in my player pool. Those are the only two guys I'm looking at. On the Orlando side of the ball, with Cole Anthony back in play, it's going to take some usage. It's going to take some shot attempts away from a lot of these guys. We saw the kind of usage this guy was just grabbing a hold of all throughout the season now. So we got to keep an eye on that. I know Jalen Suggs being out will increase a little bit of the usage for some of these other guys, but it's not a wash. Anthony's usage was much higher than Suggs so far this season. So I want to keep an eye on what actually happens here. Wendell Carter Jr. and Franz Wagner would probably be my two premium options or premier options I'd have any interest in. I think this would probably be more of a Wendell Carter Jr. game for me. But a lot of those good games were coming into games where Cole Anthony was sitting. He was seeing a little bit of increased shot attempts. A lot of the games that we saw Cole Anthony playing, he had tons of single-digit shot attempt games, and that worries me a little bit. The rebounds will still be there. Don't get me wrong. He'll still have a couple blocks, a couple steals here and there. That's not the issue. It's those double-digit shot attempts. And now he's up at 6,300. Still a comfortable price tag. But I don't want to get overindulged on a game that has a 206 game total right now, where we have a bunch of other games we could choose from. It's costing a little bit of a pretty salary of us to pay 63. So I don't really love a whole lot here. I don't want to touch Cole Anthony in his first game back. Gary Harris is in play as a value at 37, but I'm not going to go chasing big Gary Harris games. He's in play. I think I'd rather just pay the extra 300 for a guy like Duarte. But he also has some small forward eligibility as well. So for me, it's really going to be, a little bit of Franz, a little bit of Wendell Carter Jr., and maybe Gary Harris, but I'd probably rather avoid him and hope for the down game, let other people play him.
Fair enough. When it comes down to the Magic, I mean, it's interesting. You touch on a great point. Cole Anthony coming back in the mix is I think going to limit some of the upside potential of guys like RJ Hampton. He's been a popular pickup in fantasy hoops recently, but I don't see that same level of potential. He did come on end of last season with quite a bit, so something to keep in mind when we're plugging him into lineup. 3,600. It is a cheap price tag, but I kind of prefer Bones Highland on the other side of the ball when it comes down to that price tag. If we're splitting hairs, when it comes down to the forward positions and the center positions, Mo Bamba coming off a game against the Sixers where he had 6 blocks. And 17 rebounds. Do I expect a similar breakout? Not necessarily, but at 6,500, he's well in that mid-tier range, and I absolutely love Mo Bamba here. It's going to be hard to choose between him and Wendell Carter at 6,300. I think I might lean Wendell Carter and save those $200, but again, it's pretty much a toss-up. I think they're both going to be in play, especially if this game stays close. I expect both to really show out, and because Cole Anthony's in the game, I'm not going to have a lot of interest in anyone else. So it's really going to come down to just Wendell and Mo Bamba for me.
Don't fault you there. Mo Bamba has been one of those players I have not gotten right and haven't played too much of, which probably cost me a little bit of money on some of these explosive games that he's had. But that being said, we'll move on. 7:30 Eastern Standard Time game. Philadelphia 76ers traveling to Boston, taking on the Celtics. In this one, we have a 206. Actually, nope. Line just moved. 207 and a half. I wonder what that meant. Game total. Boston being favored by 1. For the injury report, Celtics, Jaylen Brown is questionable, but from what I've heard and what I've read on the Twitter sphere is that this might be the first game where the Celtics will have their entire roster, so I'm expecting him to play. And for the Sixers, Ben Simmons still out, Paul Reed and everybody else in the G League, so they should be good to go. So pretty much a full health game. I'll pass it over to you. Talk about Philly and what you're looking at here.
Yeah, when it comes down to this matchup, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the Sixers end up playing some of their studs. Now that Embiid's back in the mix, it's really hard to fade him in any game, especially against the Celtics. He usually shows up for national TV, and this game is on NBA TV. So something to keep in mind here in this game. I know he's getting his legs back from under him, but I mean, in his last game, he only had 44 fantasy points, but he also only shot 4 of 16 from the field. I expect him to right the ship very quickly and shoot closer to 45 to 50% from the field, equating to around 50 to 55 fantasy points with ease. And I trust him, and I might even tackle him as a potential high price stud at that center position as well in this type of game scenario too. As far as anyone else in the Sixers, now with Tobias Harris back, I don't trust him. 8,000. He's not going to be in play for me. Same goes down the line for Tyrese Maxey at 7,000. He has been putting up consistent numbers pretty much throughout the season, and a guy that's really shown out in the absence of Ben Simmons, you mentioned. But again, at that price tag, I'd rather look elsewhere when I'm looking at the Sixers side of the ball. With Embiid back, Drummond's not in play for me. Neither is Seth Curry, Shake Milton. Going down the line, there's not a single guy out there that's worth a flyer for me on the Sixers side, outside of potentially Danny Green. If you can get one of his 4 or 5 steal types of games at 3,400, he might be worth a dart throw in tournaments, but absolutely not for cash. And it's only Embiid for cash for me. What about you?
I'll make it very simple. No one. I am not playing any Sixers. For take it for what it's worth, I might cross this entire game off in general. I don't think I'm going to be playing much on the other side of the ball either. So we'll just segue that right over there. I'm good. All these guys are priced appropriately. They're all pretty much healthy. Maybe the one caveat on the Boston side of things might be like Al Horford. This kind of feels like it could be one of those 35 to 40 DK point Al Horford games. But we're not getting real much of a discount, so I think there's other options. It's a big slate. A lot of guys we've already talked about. We'll get to even more. So I think I'm going to take a hard pass on this game.
Wow. Bold stand, my friend. I have to say, on the Celtics side, I'm pretty much with you. Like I said, Embiid was the only guy I trust for cash on the Sixers side. And on the Celtics side, you touched on it. No one's priced to a point where I want to tackle them. If Jaren Brown somehow ends up not playing, Jason Richardson is Jason Richardson. I'm dating myself there.
Throwback
in a half.
the dunk man.
The dunk man, former Sixer as well. But Josh Richardson is in play for me at 3,900. If we get news that Brown is out, I'm going to be looking at him. But otherwise, I'm with you. There's not a single other Celtics that I'm looking at.
All right, we'll keep it moving then to the Cleveland Cavaliers traveling to Miami. They are taking on the Heat. A lot of guys to monitor in this one. 203.5 game total with a 7.5 point spread being favored to Miami, letting me think that a couple of these guys are going to end up suiting up. But to the injury report we go. Looking at the Cavs here. Dean Wade is still out. Colin Sexton, as we know, is done for the year. C.D. Osman is out. The rest of the guys in the G League. Bam is questionable. Jimmy is questionable. Dwayne Dedmon is questionable. Tyler Hero is probable, looking like he's going to return. Markieff Morris, he was not partying in Miami, so he is out. And then Marcus Garrett is in the G League. Victor Oladipo is still out. So we're really monitoring this Heat news with Jimmy, Dwayne Dedmon, Bam, less of Dwayne Dedmon, but more of Jimmy and Bam. I'll start off here with the Cavs. Guys, pretty much priced appropriately. Don't like the game total. Really going to depend on who's actually playing for Miami for me. That's what it's going to come down to, because normally not a defense I want to target all that much. But I don't mind that Mobley price tag at 65. We haven't seen that big game really come from him since he's been back. But I have a good feeling that this could be one of those 40-plus ones or 35-plus ones if it stays close. So I don't mind looking at him at 65, but not a whole lot of confidence just because of the matchup itself and the game total itself. So not a guy that's plug and playing, but I do have a little interest in him. Wouldn't mind Rubio if I land on him at 61, but I don't see myself going to too many shares in this game in general. And Garland at 74. We're going to talk about a few other point guards that I like around that similar and same price tag that I would rather take. So I'm probably not going to say I'm fading them. I'm going to keep a couple of these guys in my player pool, but I just don't see myself when it's all said and done, like in a single entry landing on any of them.
Yeah, when it comes to the Cavs, they're definitely tough to spot, especially when they're priced appropriately, like you mentioned. The guys that I'm looking at really come down to some of the guys that I've been targeting in DFS lineups pretty consistently this season, and that's guys like Lauri Markkanen. He's priced at 6,000. First time he's hit that 6K price range, but again, I think there's still a little bit of juice there that we can definitely squeeze out of him here, which is good. I think even despite this tough defensive matchup, he might be overlooked, especially in defensive matchups for the Heat. So a guy that I'm looking at 6K, and touched on Darius Garland, 2,400. Again, it's not the best matchup for him. Bam. And then when it comes down to Jared Allen as well, 8,100 is just a little bit too price heavy. I mean, we have seen some ceiling type of games out of him. His last game, he did put up 50 fantasy points, but I don't see this being one of those high scoring affairs where we can really game stack or play a lot of these guys in that 6K and above price range. And that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room left for anyone else in the Cavs. So I'm with you. I'm going to stay away from anyone else.
All right, on the Miami side of things, for me, it's all going to be surrounding Jimmy Butler, a little bit of Bam as well. If Jimmy sits, I'll have interest in Tyler Hero. I think we could play Kyle Lowry. I think both those guys come into play if Jimmy sits. If Jimmy and Bam sit, they become even better plays. And then, obviously, if Dedmon plays, he comes a near minimum salary value play. And then if this is all a scenario, so buckle up. If Bam and Jimmy sit, then I think it just gets a little bit tougher. They're gonna have to play big. Do we get to see your 7 play? Possibly. Do I trust them completely? Not as much, no. But they're gonna have to match up with the size of this front court. They're not gonna be able to just get away with throwing PJ Tucker at center and calling it a day. So he would come into play as a GPP if we see that he actually starts Hopefully they don't start Haslam. I'm a big Haslam guy. Don't get me wrong. I love to see him get 5 minutes and be that coach on the sideline still. But I'd want to see your 7 start just for some fun and for some DFS purposes. The dude's a point per minute monster, very similar to Sengun, where if these guys ever just get the run, they're going to be monsters for fantasy. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. If Jimmy plays, he's in play for me at 9,300. I think that's a fair price tag. Just not a guy that I'm overly excited about in this matchup. Again, another one with a lower game total. I think we'd rather spend up on some other spots where I'd be targeting the upside. He'd probably be more of a GPP play, but that's the way I'm looking at it. It would be Tyler Hero and Kyle if these guys sit, and then just monitoring the BAM news and seeing who's starting center in place of him if he sits.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's all about game scenarios here, depending on who's gonna end up playing in this game. So if we get news any of these guys are out, yes, I will have some interest as well in GPPs for year 7 at 3,000 in price tag. Not as much, obviously, Haslam, but I have to shout out Haslam for somehow staying on the Miami Heat roster for upwards of 20 years now. Just given his play in those 20 years, it's incredible, really, his longevity. So definitely the Iron Man there. So quick shout out to Giannis Haslam down in Miami, who's listening to our pod.
Huge fan of the pod. Huge fan.
And then as far as anyone else in the Heat, Kyle Lowry, 7,600, is definitely going to be a guy that I'm looking at pretty heavily in this matchup, especially if Butler's out. I love him. If Bam Adebayo's out as well, even more love, and he becomes almost a must-roster kind of guy in cash and tournaments alike. And then, obviously, that's pretty much it for me. Tyler Hero, 7,200, is also going to be in play if Butler and Bam are both out. And that's it on the Miami Heat side.
All right, we'll keep it moving to one of my favorite matchups, just because it's got Charlotte on it, and I think I've probably won a lot of money targeting Charlotte this season. So hopefully this is another slate we can do that. But the Charlotte Hornets traveling to Milwaukee, taking on the Bucks here, 230 game total. So looks like that's going to be the highest that we have out right now. 8-point spread being favored towards Milwaukee. For the injury report, Mason Plumlee continues to be ruled out. Cody Martin is questionable for the Bucks. Dante DiVincenzo, Brook Lopez both ruled out, along with Semi Ojeleye. And then Jordan Nwora is probable. So I'll pass it over to you. Why don't you lead us off looking at this Charlotte team? Who are you looking at? Who are you targeting? And again, are you worried about this game staying close? Do you think Charlotte can hang in?
Yeah, it's definitely a worry for me whether this game can actually stay close. But I do expect Charlotte to battle well, despite the Bucks being pretty much at full capacity when it comes to full strength. Sorry. But I still think Charlotte has definitely some plays here. If this game stays close, LaMelo Ball 10,400 is going to be in play, but he's going to be the one that's driving that force to stay close. Triple-double watch for sure, and just an incredible run he's been on. He's had a couple of duds in between against Minnesota and the Magic, but I still think that he's going to be in play if this game stays close. If this game stays close, I don't mind stacking him with Terry Rozier at 7,200. Rozier has been on a tear from a scoring perspective, scoring almost 30 points a game outside of one dud in his last 5. So I absolutely love Rozier if this game stays close too as a potential game stack with Ball. And then as far as the front court goes, I think PJ Washington 5,100 is priced a little bit too high, but this is a great matchup against the Bucks potentially where he's going to be going up against the second unit of the Bucks. So I don't mind PJ Washington more for tournaments more than anything. And then Gordon Hayward, also a guy that I just overlooked a little bit, but he is 6,300, coming off a 36-point effort. He doesn't have a high ceiling either, but if we're talking about a game stack scenario, he's definitely a name to mention as well. But my favorite plays are going to be Terry Rozier and LaMelo Ball on the Hornets side. What about you?
The Hornets, they are causing me a headache a little bit because I want to run it back if I'm playing some Bucks guys. And the best way I usually do that against the Bucks is 3-point shooters. You said Rozier, he's been shooting lights out. A little bit unsustainable, like 6 of 7 from 3 in the last one, 3 of 3 the 2 games prior to that. Took 16 3-pointers against Houston. So, I mean, he's been shooting the 3 ball pretty well. He could definitely be an option. my thought is this guy's got to cool off eventually, and I had a couple shares of him over that stretch. I don't know if this is the game he cools off of. I think that they're probably going to put Drew Holiday on LaMelo, which gives me a little bit more liking to Rozier. So I'm probably looking at Rozier and Oubre. I'm sorry, I said Oubre. Oubre is definitely in play, and he's definitely an option. He's another guy I'm looking at, but Washington was the guy I meant to say. Those are probably the three main guys I have any interest in. In Washington, I'm assuming he might draw the start in this one. He came off the bench in that last one, started the previous game, so we just have to see. That game that he came off the bench, I believe it was a back-to-back, if I'm not mistaken. No, it wasn't. It was the back-to-back that he started, both of those. So I got to keep an eye on him, kind of see what this lineup looks like. If he starts, I'll have a little bit more interest. Even if he comes off the bench, I still think he's in play. I just think we're probably looking at low 30s minutes if he comes off the bench, and if he starts, he'll probably be looking at mid 30s minutes. So he's in play at 51. Centers usually do a pretty decent job against this Bucks team. He's undersized, which is the one worry you always have to have. It's not a normal center build going against him, but he can stretch the floor. So Washington, Oubre, Rozier are all decent options. I'm just not mightily gravitating towards any of them. On the Bucks side of things, it's a little bit different. I like a lot over here. I love targeting Charlotte. They play at one of the fastest paces with one of the worst defenses in the league. This is where it gets troublesome. Do I play Giannis or do I play Jokic? I think both these guys are expensive as all hell, and I think they're all, both very much in play. This could be a 15-plus rebound game for Giannis. They just have nobody on their interior. I don't know what they plan on doing. This dude's been shooting 74% over the last 3 games. I don't know what they're going to do. I really don't. I think he's just going to dominate, and that's the one where I have this. He dominates so hard that he only gets 3 quarters in. So I would if I'm playing if I'm playing Giannis, I'm probably going to want to run it back with a Rozier or somebody on the other side of the ball and just cross my fingers and hope this game stays close. But the total's high, the pace is high for both teams. It's a picture-perfect matchup. Now, the other guy I probably have interest in would be Bobby Portis at 68. Don't love that price tag at all. Don't get me wrong. Not my favorite price tag. But I just said it. I've been targeting centers going against this Hornets team ever since Mason Plumlee sat, and it has yet to fail me. It was Sabonis. It was looking at, I think even Christian Wood had a monster one against them. I'm saying Isaiah Stewart because I'm getting ready to watch this game when we're done with the show, but there's a lot to like. Anytime a decent center is going against a Charlotte team and Mason Plumlee's out, they should cook. So more of a GPP play just because that price tag almost prices them a little bit out of cash, but I think Bobby Portis and Giannis would be my 2 main options. And listen, if you can't get to Giannis and you wanted to spend up on a guy like Middleton or Holiday, I wouldn't fault you. I just haven't seen those ceiling type performances really out of either one. We got the big one out of Drew against Indiana in that last one, but that was almost a triple double, and it's not every day that Drew's going to almost triple double with 23 points. So took 21 shot attempts in that one. I don't know if he's going to run it back and do the same thing again. But there's a lot to like on this team, so I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to go to pretty much anybody. But for me, it's mostly Giannis and Bobby Portis.
Yeah, when it comes down to the Bucks, again, do I expect this game to be high score? Yes. Do I expect it to stay close? Also, yes. So obviously, if I'm playing my narrative of a game stack scenario, it starts with Giannis. It is tough because he's the highest priced player in the entire set, 12,100, and he's priced almost at a point where it's hard to trust him. But he's a guy that we know has monster upside in this type of game scenario, especially with guys like Drew Holiday back that feed him the ball a little bit more. I do like Giannis, but again, it's going to be very much a toss-up between him and Jokic, like you mentioned. So definitely something to consider when we're building lineups, especially since it's a game where a lot of people might target it just because of the high scoring affair nature of it. So if you want to be more contrarian, you might avoid Giannis here. Guys I'm looking at instead of Giannis are guys like Chris Middleton, 7,400. We haven't seen a Chris Middleton type of ceiling game pretty much for most of the season outside of early October. So he was out for a while. Now he's getting his legs back into him. Obviously, I'm biased to Chris Middleton, as you've heard in the pod before. I drafted him way too high in some spots, and he hasn't performed. So I think this could be a great game scenario for him to really shine, especially if the Bucks go up big early. This could be a great game for him at 7,400.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, 100%.
Honestly.
100%. It's definitely in play at least. And then Drew Holiday is the only other guy I'm looking at. It's 6,900. another guy that we haven't seen a huge game yet. Obviously, against the Pacers in the last one, he did put up a big monster 47-point fantasy effort. But again, this could be a great opportunity for him to put up 45 fantasy points with ease too, and a guy that I'm going to be looking at as well. So I definitely touched on way too many guys on both sides of the ball, but that's how much confidence I have in this game staying close.
Yeah, and it's one of these are the types of matchups you want to target in fantasy. It's almost like when I saw the Houston Rockets going against the Hornets. It's fast-paced teams. I mean, I'm not going to say they're both bad defenses in this case, but the Hornets defense is terrible, and the Bucks play pretty fast. So there's a lot to like. There's always, and now it's just trying to, you could game stack these, and if it stays close, you're going to probably end up winning some money. But the Bucks are such a good team where there's always that little inherent risk where you don't necessarily feel as confident spending that 12-1 on Giannis just because of how bad that Hornets defense is. Where, I mean, let's be real, shit could hit the fan, and it could go, it could by the end of the first quarter, it could be 30-11, and it probably wouldn't shock anybody if it went that way. And then at that point, you're looking and saying, why didn't I spend up on Jokic? Why didn't I spend up on Luka? There's other options we have, but I'm still going to have shares of them. Maybe he's not your cash game spend up, and that's the way I'm looking at it. And GPP's definitely a spend up, but like I said, I might want to run it back with somebody. On to the next game, though, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. This one should stay a little guaranteed closer. Houston Rockets going to OKC. It's a rematch. We just saw these two teams face off, and there was some fantasy goodness. 211.5 game total. Oklahoma City being favored by 3 points, despite the Rockets on a little streak. DJ Augustin still in the health and safety protocols. Jalen Green ruled out. Oklahoma City, it's Mike Muscala questionable. Kenrich Williams is going to be out for the next week or two, dealing with that ankle sprain. Derek Favors has been ruled out again. So there's going to be some options in here. We'll start off with Houston here. Christian Wood all the way up to 8-9. So we're seeing that price tag jump from that low to mid sevens range to a game where we have to think about it, or a price we have to think about it. And the big difference is he's playing more center, and I think that's huge for him. That's a big boon to his rebounding upside and his value in general. At 8-9, he's still in play. Is he that smash play? Am I going to play him a ton of them? I probably had a good 60 to 70% of him in my lineups over the past 3 games. And I might start to turn that dial down from 60 to 20. I still think he's very much in play. But at 89, it makes you have to think about, your construction and your build. He might be more based towards like a mid-tier build, where if you're not paying up for many studs or any studs, that's probably the route I would take, is get him in there. But there's other options on this team. I really like Kevin Porter Jr. His price tag going up a little bit as well. Don't care. 7,400, still very, very comfortable for me. I'm going to play him as long as Jalen Green's out, and until he gets to closer to 8K, I think he's going to be in play. It's a great matchup. We just saw him triple-double against this team. Granted, it was a gimme rebound, one that he had no idea on. So if you're one of those people that are like, oh, his teammates let him get it, he didn't even know that was happening. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken him 6 seconds to go and get the rebound. So 7,400, I'll have interest in him. I think Eric Gordon's very much in play in this matchup as well. Just another dude that has been starting. He's going to continue to get double-digit shot attempts, a little bit of ball handling. So sign me up. I'm good with Kevin Porter Jr. as my top play, Christian Wood as a GPP play. You can even look at him in cash. I wouldn't fault you. Garrison Matthews at 43. Price tag slowly going up, but if he's going to continue to get 20-plus DK points at 4,300, he's a value. Still prefer Duarte and some of those other guys we talked about earlier, but he's in play. So that's probably it. It's going to be Wood, Porter Jr., Matthews, a little bit of Eric Gordon as like a pivot off of my Kevin Porter Jr. lineups.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly aligned with you across the board. The only exception it comes down to is I like Jayshawn Tate at 5,400. Again, his price tag is back to the mid 5K range. He's getting minutes in the high 20s, low 30s. A guy that can get rebounds, get assists. Doesn't hurt you in any way from a DFS perspective, but doesn't necessarily have as high a ceiling as some of the guys you mentioned, Kevin Porter Jr., Christian Wood. But a guy that can definitely fill up the stat sheet, and he has in his last game against the Thunder. So I like to run it back here with Jayshawn Tate. Kevin Porter Jr., you mentioned, a guy triple-double watched recently. Definitely going to have a lot of interest in him in cash and tournament games. Christian Wood is also going to be a tournament play for me, more than cash as well, you mentioned. And then Garrison Matthews has been getting a lot of minutes recently. He's starting, and what an effort for him. In his recent games, too, coming from the G League, barely getting any minutes at all this season to now starting playing 30 minutes, putting up fantasy relevant performances. So a shout out to him and his work ethic there. So that's exciting to see. And so I definitely have some interest here on a bunch of guys in the Rockets side of the ball as well.
All right, we'll slide over to that. Segue to the Rockets. Only two guys I'm really looking at. It's going to be Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. Been drawing the start at center, no Derek Favors. And then we've been seeing little splashes of the guy that we thought was going to be their starting center at the beginning of the season, who's Isaiah Roby. He played 27 minutes in that last game. I don't expect him to shoot 8 of 10 again. But at 3,400, if for some reason we see him drawing the start, he's very, very much a great value play. Even if he doesn't draw the start, I'd probably limit him to GPPs. I don't have the confidence yet to say play him in cash. But at 3,400, I'll have interest in both these starting centers. Well, they can't both start center, but I'll have interest in both these guys. A little upsetting that Roby doesn't have power forward eligibility. But those are probably the two main pieces I have interest in. Shea's a great play, but 8,300, there's other guys I'd rather play. And I can't play all these 8K guys. It's not going to be able to happen on this slate, so I got to start eliminating some. But if you wanted to play them, I wouldn't fault you. Don't see myself going to Dort or Giddey or Baisley. I just don't see myself landing on any of those guys. But it's a great matchup, so I don't fault you if you do.
Yeah, when it comes down to the Thunder side of the ball, I'm with you. As far as value goes, Isaiah Roby is a guy that I'm looking at in that center position. 3,400 is a great price tag. Anyone else, Josh Giddey, 1,600 is just priced too high. We haven't seen him, the young rookie, put up a lot of scoring recently. He hasn't really been doing a lot of that, which is definitely hurting a lot of his daily fantasy potential. Once he figures out how to score, he's like a triple-double watch every night of the week, in my opinion. So we'll have to monitor that rest of the season. When it comes down to anyone else in the Thunder side, I'm probably going to stay away. Trey Mann is a guy that is a rookie that I'm intrigued by, and a guy that we've seen some flashes this season coming off a 30-minute game where he did put up 32 fantasy points. At 3,500, might be too risky of a play, but he's going to be very low owned in this game. And if he does put up 25, 30 fantasy points, that could really win some nice lineups potentially. So that's a name to look at. So the guys I'm looking at is probably going to be Isaiah Roby, number one, followed by a little bit of Trey Mann, and that's it for me on the Thunder side.
All right, we'll keep it moving. Only 2 games remaining. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. Dallas Mavericks traveling to New Orleans. They are taking on the Pelicans. Got to keep an eye on this injury report because the big name, Kristaps Porzingis, is questionable. Twisted his ankle in that last game, sprained it, did not return. I imagine he probably sits this one out. Willie Cauley-Stein will remain out. Frank Ntilikina out. For the Pelicans, they are good to go outside of Zion. Right now, this game has a 214 game total, Dallas being favored by 4 points. Quite simple for me here. Luka Doncic in play. If Porzingis sits, the upside's even greater. The usage will be higher. We've seen him triple-double in that last one. So, again, throw another guy in there. This one has a higher game total than the Denver-Orlando game. Better chance of staying close, I think, than that Charlotte-Milwaukee game. But I still think I prefer the other 2 guys over him ever so slightly. If Kristaps gets ruled out, that's going to throw a wrench into things because I don't think I'll have the money to spend $12K on 2 different players. I'm only going to be able to pick one of these guys for the most part. Unless, we get Value City, which is always nice. But then I also want to take advantage of whoever steps in for Kristaps. I think Kleber and Dorian Finney-Smith would be the 2 guys that do so. I played some Kleber on that lastly. I didn't get the rebounds. I got the 13 points I wanted. I didn't get the rebounds, but eventually he's going to take over that starting center spot. We've already heard Jason Kidd come out and talk about that. They're just trying to get him back into game shape. Ever since he missed some time, he was dealing with that, I think it was an oblique injury, perhaps. But he needs to get back into game shape, and that's the number one thing for him. But this could be one of those matchups. We've seen him play 30 minutes already a couple times when he came back. I'm expecting somewhere around that, 25 bare minimum up to 32 minutes. At 4,300, he's in play. And then we might just see Finney-Smith slide over to the floor. They started Moses Brown in that last game. Don't play Moses Brown. He's just kind of taking that Willie Cauley-Stein role where he's playing 10 minutes, just a placeholder kind of thing, letting Kleber come off the bench. But keep an eye on the starting lineup. It may start to switch where Kleber is eventually going to draw that start at center. And then Dorian Finney will probably still slide up to the 4 if Porzingis is out. But I think both those guys are very, very much in play. I think they're good plays. And then I think Doncic is always going to be in play, especially if Porzingis sits.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. I mean, if Porzingis is out, Doncic is going to be a rock solid play at that high price tag. Again, we have so many guys at that high price that it's going to be really hard to choose. And you mentioned juggling two guys potentially over $11,000 in your lineup. It will have to really build out some interesting lineups to fit them. But I don't have as high interest in Luka as I did other guys like Giannis and Jokic earlier. But still, this could be a great opportunity for him to put up another triple-double, something we haven't seen a lot of this season, surprisingly, but something to look at. And then if Porzingis is out, I do like Maxi Kleber at 4,300 a little bit more. He's going to be in play for me at that price tag. He's definitely a guy that I'm looking at and a guy that I'm going to have some interest in. You mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith at 4,200, also in play as a potential guy to replace some of those usage and minutes for Porzingis if he is out. And that's pretty much it for me on the Dallas side. I'm not going to target a lot of Moses Brown, despite him starting the last couple of games. We did see Moses Brown act as a world beater in fantasy in DFS as well last season in the Thunder. But we haven't seen any of that, even instances of that on the Maverick side. So I'm going to steer far away from Moses Brown here.
He's too raw. Maybe in the future this guy has some potential, but as of right now in his career, he's way, way too raw of a prospect. Sometimes he looks just a little lost out there. He has trouble keeping up with the speed of the NBA game. He has all the block potential and the rebounding potential in the world, but he's not going to get it done in 10 minutes. So, yeah, I'm with you. Hard pass on him. On to this Pelican side of the ball, Brandon Ingram, 7,500. Great price tag for a guy that pretty comfortably could put up 40 every single game. He hasn't showed us that 50-point upside. We even saw a couple 60-point upside games from him in the past. 7,500, he's right there, smack dab. I think he's one of the better mid-tier value plays on this slate. So I do have some interest in Brandon Ingram. Outside of him, wouldn't mind taking a stab at a guy like Devontae Graham at 46, but I'll probably end up going other places like Duarte for only $600 cheaper, getting that extra money, spending it somewhere else. So I think for the most part, it's really just going to be Brandon Ingram. If Jovel has another game like that, I'll eat it off the chin. I'm not expecting this dude to hit 7 of 8 3-pointers and put up 39 actual points and 15 boards and all that. That was a great matchup against the Clippers. We touched on that in the podcast. It wouldn't shock me if it was one of those instances. You hear me say it a lot. Would it shock me if he has a great game? Absolutely not. Dallas is pretty weak on the interior. They give up points to centers often, but paying $9,200 for him is just not something I'm looking to do.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, on this side of the ball, on the Pelicans, I mean, Brandon Ingram, great price tag, a guy that does have that huge upside you mentioned. We haven't seen a lot of it this season, but he has 45 points written all over him potentially in this matchup. A guy I'm looking at. I actually love J-Val. I've been targeting him quite a bit in DFS. He has burned me on several occasions, but a guy that we've seen what he can do. Is he going to ever make 7 3-pointers again in his career in a game? Probably not. But I also think that he has so much potential here going up against Dallas and their weak front court that he can put up solid 45, 50 fantasy points without blinking in this game, especially if it stays close. So I like J-Val and Brandon Ingram as my two guys I'm looking at. Not a ton of value here that I'm really going to be tackling or really chasing. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a great story earlier this season, but he's been tapered off significantly recently. So I'm not going to look in there. I also have some interest as a player in Herbert Jones, but again, a guy that we haven't seen a lot of offensive ability outside of his last game against the Clippers, and that was a blowout scenario. So I don't expect a lot of interest there as well. So I'm just looking at the two top tier guys, and that's J-Val and Brandon Ingram you mentioned as well.
All right, final game of the night, standalone late game starting at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. Sacramento traveling to L.A. Not much of a travel for them. They're on a back-to-back. They're playing the Lakers there tonight. So they will stay in the Staples Centers for 2 straight nights, just facing a different team. Right now, we do not have a game total. We do not have actually, no, we do. 219.5, 6.5-point spread to the Clippers. No injury report for the Kings, but for the Clippers, Batum, Kawhi Leonard, both ruled out, as we know, and then Jason Preston is ruled out as well. Notable names for the Kings that sat tonight, Barnes and Bagley both sat out, along with Mo Harkless. So the front court might be a little depleted, again, for a back-to-back game. Looking at this Sacramento team, I think this is a fantastic spot for Rashawn Holmes. He's a great price tag at $5,800. It's going to be a back-to-back. I don't really care about that. He was out, I think it was due to an eye injury. So sign me up. I'm good with him. $5,800. smash spot for him. We had a little technical difficulty, so this is going to be chopped into the previous recording. But leaving off, we didn't want to just end it there. Leaving off on the final game of the night, standalone late game, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time game, Sacramento on the second half of a back-to-back, staying in the Staples Center, which is getting renamed, so I don't know if we can even call it the Staples Center anymore. Taking on the Clippers for an injury report. Clippers, Batum, Leonard, Jason Preston, all out. For the Kings, we saw that Bagley, Barnes, and Mo Harkless sat out for tonight's game. So wouldn't shock me if those three guys happen to sit out another one. Starting off with a game total. We'll get to that, actually, before I start off. 219.5, Clippers favored by 6.5. Looking at this Sacramento team, there's one guy that really stands out to me as somebody that I could see myself having some decent shares of, and that would be Rashawn Holmes. At 5,800, we just saw the Jonas big game coming against this team. Rashawn Holmes won't step out and hit 7 of 8 3-pointers, but he should clean up the glass on this Clippers front court. I'm fully expecting that. Not a guy that they like to pull off the court, especially while they're undersized. So I'm expecting a big game. This one kind of has like one of those 15 and 13 games written all over it for Holmes. He'll get chipping a couple blocks. I'm fully expecting 30 to 35 plus DK points out of him in this one. So Rashawn Holmes is probably going to be my main target. Wouldn't mind taking a stab at a guy like Terrence Davis if it draws another start as a value play. I think we have better options that we've already talked about, but I'll keep him in my player pool. Those are going to be the two guys I'm primarily looking at. I'm not going to be paying 88 for Fox despite his better play as of recently. And I wouldn't mind Buddy Hield, but I don't think I'll end up going there at the end of the day. So for me, it's mostly going to be Rashawn Holmes and maybe a stab at Terrence Davis, mostly in those like later lineup builds.
Yeah, when it comes down to the Kings, it's interesting. Rashawn Holmes, 5,800, I think, is one of the best players in the 5K price range. Apologies. So I definitely like him a lot. The only guy I'm looking at else on the Kings is one other name I'm looking at, and that's one of the surprise players that have been added to the starting lineup. But it's not Terrence Davis. It's Chimezie Metu. I really like him at 3,800. We have seen some potential in his last game. He did put up over 28 fantasy points in a matchup against the Grizzlies. Again, it's a back-to-back set, so it's something to monitor as well, and something to keep in mind when we're looking at guys like this. But from a value perspective, he's definitely a guy that if he gets 25, 30 minutes in a game, he should be able to get enough rebounds and enough offensive numbers to make it worth our while here. So those are the guys I'm looking at, and that's going to be Rashawn Holmes and Metu, and that's pretty much it on the Kings side of the ball as well.
All right, we'll slide over to the Clippers. Looking at this team, there's one guy that really stands out to me as somebody I can see myself having a few shares of, and that's going to be Marcus Morris. He's finally back to playing good minutes. He played 34 minutes against the Warriors, played 31 against Dallas. So it looks like they're not afraid to play him these big minutes. He's only 4,400, fills up that forward spot. I like the matchup right here. So I am good with having some Marcus Morris. He's probably going to be the only guy. Wouldn't shock me if we see a decent Zubac game in here, but I'm not going to go out on a limb and say play him. I would say in your tournaments only. It's just centers have dominated the Kings all season long, along with shooting guards, but they don't really have a traditional shooting guard here. So I'm probably just going to be leaning Marcus Morris. I don't see myself getting to Paul George despite thinking he's going to have a good game. It's just not fitting my builds as of now. So I'll leave it with just Marcus Morris.
Yeah, when it comes down to the Clippers, a team that I was targeting quite a bit earlier in the season when it came down to the daily fantasy, but for some reason lately I haven't had as much interest. And Paul George is a guy at 10,200 is just priced a little bit too high for me, given this game scenario. Does he have 50-point upside? Yes. I just don't see that happening against the Kings, especially going up against a Kings team that might be tired on a back-to-back play in the Lakers the night before. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I'm not going to be looking at Paul George too much. You touched on Marcus Morris, 4,400. That's a great price tag for him. And then as far as anyone else on the Clippers side of the ball, when it comes to the guard positions, Eric Bledsoe, 4,900, is a GPP only type of play for me. We have not seen great games out of him recently. He's been very much inconsistent this season, but he does have 35 point upside at 4,900. It might be worth a shot in tournaments in this game against the Kings, but again, outside of a guy like Marcus Morris, 4,400, there's not a ton of value here that I trust on the Clippers side of the ball either. And that's pretty much it for me on the Clippers side of the ball. All
right, we will wrap that up with our player tier segment. So I'll pass it over to you. Expensive tier, who are you looking at?
Yeah, expensive tier. I'm going to have to go with it's going to be Nicole Yokic for me on the expensive side. What about you?
I like it. Obviously, you heard I'm probably just going to go with the other guy that we talked about and take the cop out, go Giannis, 12-1. It's going to be tough to get there. I think that for a lot of people it will be, but I just love both these guys tonight. I think, that game script, if it stays close, there's no way in hell this dude doesn't put up 60+. So I'll take Giannis. I think he actually does pay off that 12-1 price tag. And for the mid-tier, 8K or less, who you got your eye on?
I'm going to be looking at Drew Holiday. I think another Bucks target here. Just we touched on how much we want to stack this game, so I'm going to go with another guy on the Bucks side that I trust in this matchup.
I was tempted to say Kevin Porter Jr., who I really do like, but I think I got to stay on brand and go with Rashawn Holmes at 58. I do like Holmes as well in this matchup. I think he'll barely draw any ownership on the slate. We're going to need to save a little bit of money, and I think at 5,800 he's a good option. So. As much as I wanted to just keep riding, I will keep riding that Kevin Porter. I don't want people to take this the wrong way. I will have plenty of shares of Kevin Porter Jr. as well, but I'm going to go with Rashawn Holmes in this mid-tier. And then to wrap it up, give me your favorite value play of the slate, 5K or less.
Yeah, when it comes down to value, we definitely touched on so many names here, and I'm going to have to go with one of the earlier guys we touched on, and I don't want to take a page out of your book, but I have to. I'm going to go Chris Duarte at 4,000. On the Pacers side of the ball. I think his minutes are going to be pretty high here, and it's a great matchup for him as well.
Yeah, you ripped that page right out. That's who I was going to go with. No problem. I'll recover here. I'm going to give a caveat because we need to wait on the injury news, but if we see that Anthony Edwards is ruled out, I think Malik Beasley at 45 is a fantastic option. But and then the other guy is going to be another injury caveat. If we see that Kristaps Porzingis is ruled out, I think looking at Kleber is another rock solid option. But we've talked about so many value plays that you might have to listen twice because now I'm even forgetting a bunch of them that we went over. But those are two guys that stand out to me that I had interest in. So we'll go with those two, and hopefully one. I don't want to say hopefully one of those guys sits because I think any game that Anthony Edwards sits is a crime. The dude is so fun to watch. One of the best people in the media, too. Best interviews, I think, go to Anthony Edwards this season. But that brings us home. Thank you guys for listening. Give us a follow on Twitter. You can find me at Mike Apotria, MikeApotria. Dave, let the people know where they can find you.
Yep, you can find me at DMENK33 on Twitter as well.
And then give us a thumbs up, 5-star, wherever you are listening to this. Apple's, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Oh, they found it. See, she found it on the web. If Siri can find it on the web, you guys can find it on the web and give us a 5-star thumbs up wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate it. The show fell off the rails towards the end, so if you are noticing some audio and technical issues, that is on us. It's not your computer. It's not your headphones or your phone. It is us. It got a little crunched up towards the end, so we do apologize. Don't put it against us in that review, please. 5-star. And even if you do, put a 5-star rating anyway. Thank you guys for listening. We will be back tomorrow. It will be me. It will be Harris. We'll be crushing that wonderful, wonderful Thursday slate for you. So take care. Have a good one.
Shop on eBay this holiday season to get more for your dough on stand mixers, or get more for your buck on this season's hottest tech and gaming gear. And on eBay, you can even get more Ooh. Bling for less cha-ching on jewelry. You can get more because you save more on premium brands with eBay's exclusive deals. Get more when you get it on eBay.
Some coffee's fast, but not fresh. Some coffee's fresh, but only after a long wait. Speedway coffee is made fresh at the push of a button, hot or iced, so you can have fresh coffee your way, right away. Get 2 times the points when you buy any size hot or iced coffee drink with Speedy Rewards.